All right, welcome everybody. This is the ELPS and TELPAS, best practices for incorporating language modalities across the curriculum and the classroom. And this is a part of my spring 2021 series on language acquisition and vocabulary development for English learners specifically, but for all students generally. My name is Gabriel Verone. If you have not been with me before, I am happy to see some returning faces. I am an instructional content coach working with the English Learner Support Team here at Region 11. As I mentioned, I was a bilingual teacher in kindergarten through fourth grade for well over a decade. I was an assistant principal and a bilingual reading coach before coming to the service center. And I've been here in this role for almost 2 years now. This is my lovely family. I got a 13-year-old son named Malachi, an 8-year-old son named Zachary, and my wife April and I just had our 17th anniversary. She's a critical care nurse. If you know me, I am a big comic nerd, love all things DC and Marvel, and I am the part-time preteen minister working with 5th and 6th graders at South Cliff Church in Fort Worth. So I'm happy to still be able to actually teach kids every once in a while because I do miss that direct interaction from the classroom. All right, our objectives for today, and as you can see, those objectives are aligned to T-Test. So if you are a teacher and you need professional development for your goals, you can look for these specific dimensions of the T-Test rubric. But we are going to explore the connections between the ELPS and TELPAS and look at strategies to implement the ELPS in our classroom, or if you are a coach or in an administrative position, how you can help teachers to do that. And we're going to explore a wide range of strategies that allow students to practice all modalities of language acquisition. All right, those are not listed because the goals would be really, really long and require multiple screens, but we will move through those as we complete our presentation today. So before we start, I want you to picture this. I want you to think about an English learner in your classroom or on your campus. And if you haven't had a lot of direct interaction in recent years because you're doing more of the coaching side, just think of an English learner that you have encountered at some point in your career. I want you to create a mental image of that learner, and then I'm going to put you in a couple of breakout rooms, and I'm going to give you 4 minutes, and I want you to tell the participants in your breakout room about that English learner. Okay, what makes that particular English learner stand out? And what do you remember about helping that child, or even if it's an adult learner? I know my wife, for example, was an ESL teacher at TCC and TCU before she went to nursing school. So how were you able to help that student in their journey of language acquisition? So what made you think of that student, and how were you able to help them on their language acquisition journey? All right. And I'm going to assume this is nobody's first Zoom meeting, so you will see the 60-second warning that'll count down when it's time to return to the main room. All right. If there's any questions, let me know. If not, I'm going to send you to your breakout rooms. Just going to make 2 rooms. All right. And you should see those, and you should see the invitation in the center of your screen right now. If for some reason you do not, let me know. If so, 4 minutes starting now. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a good opportunity to share, kind of get to know each other, because we are going to be doing several opportunities for collaboration. Now, does anybody want to unmute? And if you just had the most wonderful English learner and you just feel like the other group would really benefit from hearing about your experience and your vast reservoir of wisdom, or even your shallow puddle of wisdom. I'll take either one.
I'll shallow puddle. I just shared that I had, newcomers, and I learned I was going to have this class 2 weeks prior to having the newcomers. So obviously no, other than the ELL certification like I did in Florida and brought it to Texas with me and everything like that. But so I was able to build relationships and lots of smiles and make them feel comfortable. I don't think I taught them a thing about the actual content. And so I'm here so I can better support my teachers now in this different role that I'm in.
Gotcha. Well, I think we've all been there, right? I mean, I was alternative certification. I went to just be a substitute teacher while I was trying to get my seminary degree, which I never finished, and then ended up getting a master's in administration because that's life. And literally 2 weeks later, with an emergency certificate, I'm teaching 23 first graders in early exit bilingual program. And it was like kindergarten cop. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. And the fact that any of those kids somehow miraculously, all but two were reading on grade level by the end of the year. And I know it was completely in spite of me. I don't think I actually did anything positive to teach them. So I feel you. All right. Anyone else before we move on would like to share? All right. So, and remember that the chat is always available to you if you are. See that? All right. All right, here we go. Sorry, sometimes I forget that I'm reacting to private chat messages, but I'm reacting aloud. You'd think I would be used to it, being that I've been doing this online for over a year. Okay, so as we think about the characteristics of English learners, the students that we want to help, we know that they possess a wide range of proficiency in English. They may or may not speak a language other than English at home, right? Because even if their family speaks another language, but if they were born here and depending on the community they live in, English may be their only language, but they still may exhibit a lot of the characteristics of English learners that come from a dual or triple language background, right? In the state of Texas, there's approximately 180 native languages, okay? Now, in terms of experience, we know that they also have a wide range of former schooling. Again, they may have lived in the US their entire life, right? Just because you're an English learner does not necessarily mean that you are an immigrant or a refugee or an asylee or any of that, okay? But it may mean that, and they may or may not have proper documentation. And then we all know, because of testing and reporting and federal mandates and state mandates, that we love our labels, right? So these kiddos used to be LEP, but then we were like, well, that's not nice, because then we're focusing on what they can't do rather than what they can do and their potential. So then they were English language learners, or ELL, and now the preferred term is just L, right? And then we know that we also have bilingual, we have dual language, we have ESL, we have all of that, okay? So just thinking about, we want to be able to serve the entire spectrum of our kiddos, and we want to serve them at whatever level of language proficiency they currently find themselves in. Okay, so this is the first of many resources that I'm going to drop in the chat for you. We're going to be moving fast and furious through content. And so if you miss anything, or there's any resource that you're like, wow, that was really good, I like that, but then you realize, oh no, I didn't save it. Again, please don't worry, because I'm going to send you every single thing in a follow-up email tomorrow. I'm going to stop my share for a moment and drop the English language proficiency standards into the chat for you. And go ahead and open those up. We're going to be looking at those and dealing with those, and so you want to have those available. And if you do not have a digital copy, now you do. All right, it should be visible to you in the chat right now. I'm also going to drop one more resource so that I don't have to share my screen. I don't have to disturb the screen share later. You can open it as well. This is the LIAG. And if you don't know what the LIAG is, I promise I will explain. But those are the two resources that we'll be using momentarily. So go ahead and open up both of those, please. Okay. Here we go. So this is a message from TEA, and I'm going to read it because I feel like it actually is very useful. Classroom instruction that effectively integrates second language acquisition with quality content area instruction ensures that ELLs, as you can see, this is an older version, acquire social and academic language proficiency in English, learn the knowledge and skills in the TEKS, and reach their full academic potential. And so what we see is that we want to obviously focus on content, right? We have standards that children are going to be held accountable for, especially once they reach third grade, right? And at lower grade levels, depending on your district, you know that you are keeping track of their phonemic and phonological awareness, right? Their reading ability, their speed and prosody, all of that stuff, okay? But it's not enough to simply teach content. We have to meld that content with practice in specific language modalities, and that's what the ELPS do. Okay, so as the TEKS is to STAR, the ELPS are to TELPAS. We teach content standards that are tested in state assessments. Similarly, we're supposed to be teaching English language proficiency standards at the same time as those content standards, and that is tested in TELPAS. All right, and as you know, TELPAS measures reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Students in grade 2 and up take the online reading test to measure their reading ability. Our K1 emerging readers are rated on the holistic rubric, right, based on the descriptors, which we're going to talk about in just a bit. For listening, students take an online test where they are asked to complete tasks or follow directions to answer questions, right? We are almost in the season of collecting writing samples. So students submit English writing samples that are rated by campus staff based on the holistic rubric, which we will talk about. And students take an online test where they answer questions using a microphone to record speaking in English. A quick word on this last one. In the last few years, speaking has always been one of the lowest dimensions. When it was first released as an online test, we know that there was a lot of problems with the microphone, with the students recording samples not actually being recorded, and there was lots of problems, right? We're never going to get away with that, or get away from that, unfortunately. There's always going to be some complications. But one of the silver linings of the pandemic is because we do everything online, with Flipgrid, with Seesaw, we can intentionally have students record themselves and speak. And so just be mindful that this type of distance learning, hybrid learning really is an ideal opportunity for students to practice both listening and speaking that they will be tested on when they do TELPAS. Okay, and then as I mentioned, here are the domains, and we know that the proficiency levels for TELPAS reporting are beginner, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. Now, that brings us to listening, okay? We're gonna look at each modality, okay? And I've organized it by easiest modality to hardest. We know that first, students develop receptive language as they listen, right? Next, students' productive language is usually most easily expressed orally. This is usually truer for younger ELs, right? A lot of times with older kids that have some formal schooling, they actually develop written English a little bit faster because you can actually process in writing and take your time. Whereas when I speak, right, I have to take in the receptive input, I have to process it, I have to think of my response, and then I have to actually produce something, okay? So listening, speaking, then we know that the next modality is reading, and usually the most difficult to develop well is writing, and we will be looking at them in that order. Okay, so I just want you to take a minute, literally we'll take about 1 minute and 30 seconds, 90 seconds total, and just take a look at the bullets and the descriptors for each of the language proficiency levels for listening, okay? And I just want you to notice what patterns or similarities do you notice between each level, okay? So 90 seconds, and you can unmute at the end of that time, or you can drop it in the chat. What similarities do you notice between the descriptors for the language levels, or what kind of continuity or progression do you notice? Ready? 90 seconds, go. Got about 30 seconds left. Ten seconds. And time. All right, so feel free to unmute yourself or drop in the chat. What similarities did you notice between the levels, or what progression did you notice?
I noticed that from beginning to advanced high, there still is some support, because even at advanced high, what does it say? Minimal second language acquisition support. So keeping in mind that even those advanced high kids might need some support. And I think for myself, it's easy for me to reduce the support too quickly.
Right, and the tendency is you say, oh, you've made such amazing progress, you're great, I need to go help the students that are really struggling. And we sometimes take that scaffolding away, and that's not good for their building because it's not finished yet. Because if they weren't advanced high, you know what they would be? They would be reclassified as not an English learner anymore. That's
my husband's been here 32 years and he's still an ELL.
So are my parents. My dad is from Uruguay and my mom is from Spain. My mom still can't say my name in English. She calls me not Gabe, but Gave, because in Spanish, the B and the V are similar, right? Same thing. My brother-in-law is not Steve. He's Esteban.
Yeah, my husband changed my name. I'm Maria.
Okay.
I hear that all the time. I'm Maria.
I'll never forget. It's a long time ago. It's back when the Iraq War started, and my dad, still to this day watches Sean Hannity. I don't know why, but he does. And he's like, Gabriel, we gotta find the Whoppins, the Whoppins. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, the Whoppins of mass destruction. I was like, oh, the Whoppins. Got it. Okay. All right. Yep. Thank you, Marie. Appreciate it. All right. Anyone else want to unmute or drop in the chat? What did you notice about similarities in the descriptors, or what did you notice about the progression? Y'all, I am totally okay with uncomfortable wait time. I will sit here quietly. Oh, wait, no, I guess I won't because I'm not doing it right now. All right, fine, you win. You don't have to share, okay? All right. So as we think about how do we meet each of those bullets, how do we serve the students and help teachers to serve those students, I want you to go ahead and open up the LIAG. I'm pretty sure I put it in the chat. I don't know if some of you may have joined after that, so let me drop it in there one more time. But the LIAG, and hopefully you've seen this resource before, but if not, it is a linguistic instructional alignment guide. And what you'll notice is that it has the same exact linguistic domains, as the rubric that measures how students grow in TELPAS. It has the same proficiency levels, but what it does is it gives you specific concrete strategies that you can use to help students grow in and experience each specific language modality, and gives you teacher behaviors for each of the proficiency levels, okay? So today, right now, we're gonna be looking at pages 4 and 5 for listening, and what you'll see right here are the proficiency levels, and then it actually has the ELPS for you, right? We know that the TEKS are they're voluminous, right? Because there's a lot of subjects and a lot of things to teach in each subject. But for listening, it's only A through I. So that's really not bad, okay? So as you plan out lessons and objectives or help teachers to do that, you want to make them cognizant of the fact that they should always have some kind of language objective. And then, as I said, right? It has the key cognitive skills that go with these activities, right? And then it has the foundational skills of research across the curriculum and use of data and all that good stuff. So in addition to a bullet list of listening activities, and again, this is not an exclusive or exhaustive list, but it gives you the easiest and most usable best practices. But then it actually goes and gives you suggested teacher behaviors to help students at the beginning level in listening, the intermediate level, and so on up the rung. And it does this for every modality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 minutes to look at the LIAG for listening, pages 4 and 5. Take a look at the ELPS, take a look at the suggested best practices, and take a look at the recommended teacher behaviors, okay? And what I just want you to do, and I would like everyone to do this, please, just give me your one aha or your one, oh, I knew that, but this was a good reminder, and just drop it in the chat. What was the most interesting or useful bit of information for you? And at the end of the 3 minutes, drop that in the chat for me, okay? If there's questions, let me know. If not, please look at pages 4 through 5, 3 minutes to examine those pages, and then I'll give you about 30, 45 seconds to drop in the chat what was the most useful bit for you. All right, 3 minutes, go. Nope, just kidding. Let's try 3 minutes, go again. All right, apparently it doesn't want to do that. So you just go ahead and start it, and I will try and get that on my phone. I don't know why it won't do it, but it won't. If you are immersed in your reading, you got about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Erica, you win 10,000 points for being the first to respond. $20 seconds remaining. Sorry, I tried to prevent that, but I was unable to. right. Tao said that to remember to recognize and monitor. Erica mentioned wait time is essential for processing. And that's not just for English learners, that's for everybody. And I have a hard time with that because I am uncomfortable with silence, in case you hadn't noticed. Ashley said wait time stuck out as well. And the need to model gestures, right? If you'll notice, sometimes I'll do this kind of stuff. And it's not, well, my dad's from Uruguay, but he is of Italian ancestry. And so, you know, we do a lot of this at my house, and I grew up in New Jersey. So, you know, I talk like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? And people once told me that if they cut my arms off, I would be speech impaired. So yes, and Tel said frequently checking for understanding. Okay, Marie mentioned visuals, sentence stems, checking for understanding more often, and sentence frames to seek clarification. All right, and so we're going to talk about all of those today, right? And something to keep in mind, and we say this all the time at the English Learner Support Team, is that all of these strategies are essential for English learners, but beneficial for all kids, right? Some kids absolutely need it, but everybody benefits from it, right? It doesn't hurt English speakers to have visuals and frequent checks for understanding. All right. Thank you so much for each of you putting in your responses in the chat. Oh, so we're going to swing. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to let us watch this video, and then I'm going to drop you into your breakout rooms for just 2 quick minutes, okay? As you watch, I want you to look for this. In terms of the teacher, how did the teacher support students' ability to listen for meaning regardless of their proficiency level? And then in terms of the students, what types of language did she expect to receive from them as they listened and responded to what they were listening to? All right. How did the teachers support students' ability to listen for meaning, regardless of proficiency level? And then how did the students respond to that? And then I'm going to drop you in the chat to talk about that. Okay.
We've done fact and opinion before, though, haven't we? So we're going to take it a little bit further this time. And let me show you what I mean. Help me out with our objectives today.
The students will be able to.
Thank you. Distinguish fact from opinion. What do I mean distinguish? That's a big 3rd grade word. What do I mean distinguish? Karina, what do I mean distinguish?
Tell the difference.
Thank you. You're going to be able to tell me the difference today between a fact and an opinion. Okay? Help me with the next objective.
The students will be able to.
Thank you. You will orally defend their position on whether a statement is fact or opinion. This is the part that's different today. Not only will you tell me if something is a fact or an opinion, but then I'm going to ask you, how do you know? And so you have to be able to tell me, well, I know it's a fact because I can prove it. I can ask an expert, measure it, read about it, observe it. Or I know it's an opinion because it's what somebody thinks or feels.
Okay. So it was a pretty brief clip, but there was a lot of really good stuff there. So I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms. I'll be generous. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and 30 seconds. You can thank me in the chat. I also accept gift cards. No, I'm just kidding. So 2.5 minutes. What did you see the teacher doing in terms of best practices to support listening and understanding for all students? And then how did the students respond? What expectations did she have for them? All right. So you should see the invitation. Ashley, I'm going to assign you to room number 2 because they need one other person. All right, we got about 10 seconds for those of you that are back already. So we will wait for everyone to rejoin us, obviously. And then we'll just have a quick debrief. All right, everyone is back. So if I can get one person from each group, just kind of unmute yourself and give me a summation of some of the best practices that you saw. So whoever goes first can talk to me about the teacher, and then whoever goes second can talk to me about the students. And if you want to nominate someone from your group, feel free to drop their name in the chat. It'll be like the Hunger Games of sharing. I offer you as tribute. All right, someone is in the chat, but I'm having a hard time opening it. There we go. Oh, Marie nominated Ashley. Ashley, you were nominated.
You're welcome, Ashley.
Not a problem. So I was nominated to share. I got back in and I caught the tail end of what you were saying before you said that I was nominated.
Well, you are very brave, and I award you 50,000 points. So if you'll talk to me about what did your group see in terms of the best practices the teacher exhibited in order to make what she was saying as comprehensible as possible to her kiddos, regardless of their listening proficiency level.
Oh, sure. Okay, so the first thing that we discussed was there's a clear procedure for them to discuss the objective. The kiddos were using choral response to read out, and then she read the final part and had the kiddos explain in their own words what distinguish was. And we kind of talked in our chat about how allowing those kiddos to explain that in terms that they understood to their peers gave those kiddos who may not have understood what distinguish was access to that information.
Fantastic. All right. And Ashley, I see why they chose you. You are an excellent representative for your group. Do you want to add anything else?
What else did we discuss?
I'm not saying what you said is insufficient. I just want to give you a chance to shine as brightly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Verone. I think that's it.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So can everybody give her some snaps? I know she can't hear them, but she can see you. There you go. All right. So, all right. One time I was really tempted to be like, all right, everybody give Ashley jazz hands. All right. So at church, when we lead worship for the little kids, we call those praise the Lord hands. Anyway, sorry, that's neither here nor there. So someone from the other group, tell me, what language did you see students using in response to the teacher's prompts? How did they respond to what they were listening to? Oh, it looks like we got another nomination. Oh no, Marie just mentioned that there was an anchor chart as well. Thank you, Marie. That is true. Yes. Right. So not only did they heard it, right? They said it and they saw it, right? And they could go back and refer to it later. Okay. So again, notice multiple modalities working hand in hand. All right. So Ashley, which breakout group were you in? Were you in 1 or 2?
2.
2. Okay. So I need somebody from group 1.
In 1, we talked about just the reading of the teak for them to go through as a team. And it seems like a lot of people on our team are actually virtual or even asynchronous in how they are giving the lessons.
Okay.
So we were talking about how that could apply for online and not just in person, and using that language when everyone's scattered all over the place online.
Right. So, and it is much more difficult to promote good oral language habits with kiddos that are virtual, right? I mean, because it depends on your level. You could be like, okay, go to your breakout rooms, right? If you do Zoom, but then you have to go in and check in on the rooms. The structure of it is much more difficult, right? So let's talk about that real quick. What, if any, solutions or workarounds, and I'll offer some suggestions as we get into specific strategies, but this would be a great time if you're like, hey, I've done this has been really helpful, or, we tried this and had varying degrees of success. Maybe you're doing some stuff that other people aren't doing, or maybe somebody clued you into something top notch that you might want to share. So again, you can unmute yourself or you can drop that in the chat. I'll give us about 20 more seconds and then we can move on. Unless, it results in a really good discussion, and then we'll stay here. Oh, and Nathan, thank you you're the only other dude. Way to represent. So no one has any solutions for virtual. We're just like, no, we're doing it. It's not working great. And we're all stuck. That's kind of, Adrian's like, that's kind of where we are, Mr. Verone. Yes, it's true. Okay, good. Excellent. That's encouraging. The reality
of Flipgrid and Canvas discussion posts, but in my district, synchronous is not a requirement. So we don't really do the breakout rooms. And we have hybrid classes. So I could have 10 kids in my classroom if I was teaching in the classroom. And then I could have two classes or 20 kids online in the same class period. And my online kids are not necessarily even logging into Canvas. So we're having to hunt them down. So we have a whole bunch of fires that we're trying to figure out how to put out.
Right. And I mean, I in no way mean to downplay the difficulty of what you're doing. I fully acknowledge that it's a beast, and just getting them there, forget about having them be engaged, just getting them to engage at all in terms of showing up is a challenge. Can I ask you this? How are you using Flipgrid? Like when students are expected to use it, what's the format? What are the expectations?
So I actually, being honest, because I'm a secondary ESL coach, so I don't get to see a lot of it. My classroom observations is a lot of times watching kids sit in front of a computer. And so I don't see a lot of what they get to do. I know in my classroom and the couple of teachers that I work very closely with, it usually comes in terms of like responding to something they've read or something that they've worked on and processed over a couple of days. And then they're given like a prompt and a sentence frame to help them out. And then the expectation of them to listen and respond to somebody else's.
Okay, so then they do have those frames. And then when they respond, do they have a specific response stems that they are expected to use as well?
So they should be given one by the teacher. And I know some teachers are a little bit better about that than others, but I mean, the expectation is yes, there should be one that they should be using.
And the reality is this, that we all know, I post a video with a frame and then you respond and then I respond to your response. It's artificial, it's painstaking, it's never going to take the place of face-to-face interaction. But unfortunately, for the foreseeable future, that's the world we live in. And so I really don't have much beyond that. The only thing that I might add, and we'll get into this later, is occasionally having kids kind of rate each other on a rubric. And again, some kids are like, oh, dude, I'm not going to do that. I don't care, right? But like a good friend of mine who is now retired and is a realtor once said, if it's not monitored, it's not required. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Adrian. Anyone else want to address the unique challenges of having children have authentic language interactions over in a virtual environment? No? All right. No, I don't want to watch the video again. There we go. So the bottom line is this. Maybe some of you are like, Adrian, you look pretty young. So do you remember Charlie Brown's teacher? Okay. I don't know.
35, man.
Okay.
35?
Well, girl, I figured you were like 27. So, so yeah, you don't want to, the bottom line is you don't want to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, right? And you don't want students to sound like that to each other, right? You don't want to be giving this really great content and this lesson, but all children hear is wah, 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 right? I kind of wish that's what I heard when I went to visit my mother-in-law, but unfortunately I am a native English speaker. So, all right, I won't play you the video. Maybe I will. This thing is really not cooperating. But I want you to read this. Now, again, this isn't a listening activity, but I'm not going to say this because I've done it and it's painful. Just read it. This is an announcement being made to a class of primarily English learners. And this is what the beginner students hear. Of all the words you say, these are the ones they're able to pick out. So go ahead and tell me, what is the teacher announcing? Tamara's like, I think I know. No, she's like, no, I don't. Just kidding. Oh, yeah, Erica, don't cheat. Don't answer. I will revoke 40,000 of your points. Okay, Maria says after school parent pickup. Maybe. Anyone else? Nathan says field trip. If this is the field trip, you're going to be like Arnold. I wish I'd stayed home today, right? Okay, yeah, Marie, don't say it. Okay, Ashley says maybe what to do is dismissal. For those of you that are that have been with me before, thank you for being letting others. Okay, so now let's pretend same exact announcement, but an intermediate child, they hear this. Okay, I have you today. We are going field trip next week. Nathan, 80,000 points for you. Well done. Yep, see. On Thursday, we will the buses. Day to go. Parents read and sign this. Parents like to. Please put this in your backpack. Take home tonight. Remember, bring it, go with us, right? So we did verify it is a field trip, but what essential information are the intermediate kiddos missing? The beginner kids are out of luck. They don't know where they're going, what they're doing. They're not, right? Parents read and sign this. Whatever they're supposed to sign, they ain't bringing it back because they don't know what it is, right? So the beginners, they're stuck. What important information are the intermediates missing? Adrian says permission slip form and chaperones, right? Now, again, here's the thing too, right? We are adults. We know how to inference real good. We know that children don't. That's why they do poorly on this on the STAR every year, regardless of grade level, right? And so realistically, your intermediates probably understand even less than this, because if you just say all this stuff, right, you just throw out these like 5 to 10 sentences, right? There's the rigor of processing this much language, plus this is probably the end of the day, right? So you got to take all that into account. All right. So now here's what your advanced and advanced high, there's an advanced high separate screen, but go ahead and read this and what information has been filled in for your upper level EL children who have better understanding. What additional information did they garner? All right, Adrian says, what time and how long? Nathan says to sign the permission slip and a slight understanding of what happens if not signed. That's a very good point. Ashley concurs with you, Nathan, about signing the permission slip. All right, the bottom line is, I won't belabor this. We understand that the first battle of language acquisition is listening. Students can't do anything else if they have no comprehensible input, okay? There's the advanced high and there we go. So the question is, what am I supposed to teach or help my teachers teach? And that would be the content TEKS plus the ELPS, okay? So with the LIAG, right, we have our different dimensions, right? We have the standards, and then we have the strategies to help us implement those standards. So the bottom line is we want to create content and language objectives that tell us what we're teaching, what we want students to know, and how are they going to process and demonstrate their understanding with language modalities, right? So you take the what, you take the how, you mix them together, and you have a learning solution. All right. And this is unlike most of the stuff in the science lab, which you don't want the children to consume. They can drink the learning solution. Okay. And no goggles or safety apron is required. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of this. All right. Let's say I was teaching Science TEK 3.5a. So third grade Science TEK. All right. Matter and energy. The student knows that matter has measurable physical properties, and those properties determine how matter is classified, changed, and used, right? Which means I'm going to measure properties, I'm going to test for properties, and I'm going to record physical properties. And you can read what those properties are. Okay, so that's my science objective. We're going to measure and test the properties of physical objects. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to intentionally pair that with a listening ELP. Okay, the student is expected to understand the general meaning, main points, and important details of spoken language, ranging from situations in which topics, language, and context are familiar to unfamiliar. And obviously, depending on grade level, right? Third grade, they have done at least some of this, but what if they're a newcomer, right? Or what if they're a beginning student, right? So some of my advanced and advanced high, some of these terms are going to be familiar, but for some of my beginner and intermediate, right? Temperature, buoyancy, magnetism, those are all going to be very new. All right. So how do I make this practical and usable for third grade students? Well, if it'll ever load, I'll tell you. There it is. So we will hear predictions from our group about the identity of a mystery object after we share jobs to investigate the object. And that's going to be measuring length, weight, and test for buoyancy and magnetism. So groups are going to orally make predictions. Again, there's really more than one modality being used here, right? They're speaking, but what I really want children to focus on is hearing those predictions, right? Taking what they hear from other students and trying to make it into comprehensible input. And I'm going to tie that specifically to key vocabulary for testing physical objects, which is length, weight, buoyancy, and magnetism. Make sense? Okay, so here's what you're going to do. I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms. You're going to use your LIAG pages 4 and 5 that you reviewed earlier. You're going to use this same exact TEAC, and you're going to create with your group one student-friendly objective that combines this TEAC with a different listening objective, okay? And you're gonna write it in student-friendly language. Now, you can do the learner will be able to, students will, we will. I don't really care about that part. Whatever your district expectation is, and I realize those are different, you can bring that to bear or you can simplify, but I really want you to think about how can you combine the content with a language objective specific to listening, and you will find that on page 4 of your LIAG, okay? And if you're having a hard time with like the kind of dense specific objectives, just kind of look at some of the suggested activities or teacher behaviors, and that should elucidate that for you, all right? So I'm gonna give you, you want 3 minutes or you want 4? Show me on your fingers, you want 3 or 4? All right, I gotta vote for 4. Nathan's like, I'm so good, I can do it in 2. No, I'm just kidding, Nathan. All right, 4 minutes it is. So I'm gonna give you 4 minutes. I'm gonna send you to your breakout rooms. Remember, this TEAC, and I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in the chat for you. That would probably be helpful, wouldn't it? Come on, there we go. No, apparently I'm not. Sorry, my cursor is not cooperating. There we go, now I got it. Now, just so you know, if you actually want to have access to this, you're going to need to copy and paste it from the chat, because once you go to your breakout room, it'll be gone. Okay? So if there are no questions, go ahead and copy that. Remember, each group is only responsible for one content and language objective, and go ahead and put it in the chat for me when you come back. All right? I know that was a lot, but I have faith in you. You have 4 minutes. If you have questions, let me know. And remember that in your room, you can raise your hand and I can come join you. All right? 4 minutes, go. All right, welcome back, everybody. If one kind soul from each group will be kind enough to drop your learning objective into the chat.
Well, about that. So we looked at a couple, like we narrowed it down to some of the ELPS, but
Okay.
actual writing it.
Well, here's the good news.
Mhm.
I don't judge. Like I literally, the sermon last week was do not speak against or judge your brother. And like, it's not like ambiguous. So I don't judge you. It's okay. And listen, what did I give you? 4 minutes? That's not very long. You know what I mean? It's not. I know that, but I also want to get you out of here in a timely manner, and we still have 3 more modalities. So just tell me, which ELPS did you narrow it down to? Which ones did you feel like would have been a good fit besides the one that I showed you as an example?
Oh, I didn't even remember which one you showed us. We talked about E
and G, right?
and G. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would have to, because I have to go back. I don't off the top of my, I mean, I'm good, but I'm not so good that I remember. There we go. So there we go. Let me go hop back up to E and G. So here we go. Sorry about that. Sorry, it just takes it a second to load. Okay, so E, use visual, contextual, and linguistic support to enhance and confirm understanding. Okay, fantastic. So something, now, you know what? Actually, I'll tell you my suggestion for how to bring that alive, but let me hear what the other group has to say. And then I love E. E is really good. E, you should just kind of be doing all of the time, I feel like, right? I feel like, why is that even like, why don't we just put that one to always do this, right? All right, so you guys are, I forget, you guys are group 2, right, Tamara? 2? Okay, so group 1, did you meet with similar difficulties as group 2?
No, we nailed it.
Yeah! But at least you didn't throw it in their face. That's good. Oh, okay, it's right here. The students will watch a video of the teacher conducting a lab over measuring, testing, and recording physical properties of matter and take notes. Then they will respond by summarizing the lab and their findings, right? In order to summarize, they have to actually listen first, right? So the reality is, to demonstrate their mastery of listening, students are going to have to show you something, right? So this is the kind of it's the tricky part of the listening ELPS, is that you can say we're going to do listening stuff, but I don't know if you actually heard unless you show me, right? It's kind of like you have to make your invisible thinking visible to me, okay? So very nice, group 1, but group 2, we still do not judge you, okay? It's okay. You get a participation trophy just like all of the children. So something that I like to do with big idea terms is I like to assign a total physical response, right? So I'll say, okay, weight, right? Mr. Verone has a lot of weight, right? I realize there's a difference between weight and mass, right? But if you think heavy, you think weight, right? If we think buoyancy, if it's buoyant, it floats. So everybody do it with me. Say weight, right? Say buoyancy, right? Magnetism means that they are attracted to each other, right? So magnetism, right? And then length. So what I might do is I might say, we're going to use total physical response to demonstrate our understanding of terms as they are mentioned and students make their predictions, right? So I may even just jump on the prediction bandwagon and add those total physical response and let them know that I expect them, whenever we say that, each time if we talk about, well, what is the measurement of this object? I want them to do that so that I know that they are hearing the term in context and doing it, okay? All right, beautiful. Now let me, oops. Oh, I forgot. It would probably be faster if I advance this here. Sorry about that. I forgot that I had gone back so far. All right, we are on to dimension 2. Now, this won't take an hour like the last section did because there's no introduction. We're just going to jump into it. And after this section, I have a 15-minute break planned. But we have been here a little over an hour. So give me a thumbs up if you're like, hey, I could use a quick 5-minute break. Or if you're like, no, I'm good. Let's just do it. So it's up to you. All right, I got 2 definitive no's, and I got a bunch of smiles. So, all right, we're going with the no's. All right, here we go. So let's move on to speaking. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to have you read this, okay? Because I wanted you to really think about the listening, because believe it or not, the listening presents the biggest challenge in terms of trying to pair them, right? So as you think about the 5 dimensions for speaking, okay, in terms of the bullets, you'll notice each level has 5, right? They deal with conversation and discussion and a student's ability to engage in that. Their vocabulary usage, from very simple, concrete vocabulary to vocabulary comparable to English learners, especially in terms of academic vocabulary use, right? It looks at grammar and sentence structure, right? Then it talks about the persistence or lack thereof of second language acquisition errors. And then lastly, pronunciation, okay? So I recommend that when I send this to you, that you refamiliarize yourself with these, but the LIAG is going to touch on a lot of this, so we're not going to belabor the point. Okay, so for the purposes of this dimension, as we use the LIAG, we're going to be looking at pages 6 and 7. This is the same exact slide, same exact bit.ly and QR code, but we're looking at pages 6 and 7, okay? So again, 6 and 7, same thing, right? The nice thing is there's not that many ELPS, right? Even for speaking, you only have one more. Instead of A through I, it's A through J, all right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, just like last time. Go ahead and look at pages 6 and 7 and familiarize yourself with as much of the LIAG as possible. We won't do a debrief on it, okay? We will just use it to inform the rest of our study of the speaking modality, all right? So 3 minutes. Go ahead and look at pages 6 and 7, and maybe, no, well, just go ahead and start and I'll work on the timer. I don't know why it gives me such a hard time. No, all right. Okay, I see how it is. This timer is a little bit behind because I started it on my phone since it was having difficulties. So you got just over a minute. Just over 1 minute. All right, 30 seconds. All right, and time. So as we think about the LIAG, here's where we're going to go for this dimension. So we think about cooperative group work, oral presentations, interactions with peers, large and small group instructional interactions, one-on-one interviews, discussions, articulation of problem-solving strategies. I really like that one, right? Because we tend to think of this a lot of times only in terms of language arts or responding to reading, right? But it's important for them to engage in those conversations also in math, in physics, when doing chemistry equations, all of that, and individual student conferences. Where we're going to go in this dimension is I'm going to give you research-based, high leverage best practices that make these activities, which are outgrowths of these ELPS, which make these as effective as possible. Okay, so that's where we're going here. So the first one is sentence stems. Now, as Adrian said, she does this, or her district requires this, at least ostensibly, right, for recorded speaking interactions. But I feel like a lot of times we think of sentence stems as a tool for writing, but it's really important to think of them as a tool for speaking as well, especially, I'll never forget, I was doing pre-K coaching back when we still actually went to campus, right? When like visitors and guests could go to a school. I know it was so long ago. I had to ride my dinosaur there in those days. But anyway, and I had these little pre-K babies, right? And the teachers had in most pre-K you have a teacher and an assistant, and the students are doing interactive play, and they have these beautifully organized centers, right? And they've got writing materials in the centers, and they have posted lesson and unit theme vocabulary. I mean, just like the amount of preparation was staggering, right? And then the teachers are asking these really great questions about what the students are doing, but the students are just giving them one or two. Oh, so what are you doing here? Building. Oh, well, what are you building? Stuff, right? Oh, well, what vocabulary? Oh, a corral. Like I got one kid actually said a corral, right? Like they looked up on the wall, they saw the picture, right? But my thing is, why are you not, and again, I'm not trying to be mean, I'm not judging, right? I told the teachers this to their face in our debrief, right? How can you get these kids to say these high leverage academic vocabulary words in complete sentences, right? Well, I mean, they're 4, mister, they're still struggling. Right, I get that, okay? Some of them are literally just like were out of diapers before they came to pre-K. I get that. But if you don't expect them to do it, they're not going to do it. So, sorry, I got on my soapbox there. I apologize. All right, so here we go. Sentence stems. This is at the secondary level, but obviously it works for elementary too.
Sentence stems are a part of the sentence that students can then build on to complete their thought or their sentence. So I may write the first 2 or 3 words of a sentence, and then students can fill those in with the remaining words. So it's a framework that the students can use. I like using them because it helps me incorporate writing into my class to where my students can access it, and it gets them started with a project. It gets everyone's head down, pen to paper, and kind of allows them to focus on what the prompt is. And they're really effective for the English language learners because a beginner student can add a couple words, they can complete a thought, and an intermediate, advanced student can finish that sentence and add another sentence. So often they're receiving information. If you get them writing, they're really thinking about what they're doing. So using a sentence stem really allows the ESL students to access that critical thinking. So it just kind of helps students get started and gives them a framework.
All right. Now, again, I acknowledge they didn't use sentence stems to speak, right? You don't often see that even in videos, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still a good practice. And I don't know if you noticed, that lady had a slight British accent, which makes everything she said automatically correct and more sophisticated than everything we say. In fact, I think I might do the rest of the presentation like this. So when utilizing sentence stems, you're forcing students to build a foundation of academic discourse and to knowingly and intentionally engage in that practice, not only as they themselves formulate their own thoughts, but as they respond thoughtfully to what others have said as well. Thank you. That will be all. You may go home. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I apologize. Okay, Maria's like, I'm laughing, but I don't know if it's because it was funny or because I'm shocked that you have this job. And Nathan's like, dude, just go on with the presentation, please, for the love of goodness. Okay, I will, Nathan, I promise. All right, so sentence stems should do the following. They should allow students to discuss the lesson objective and or essential question, right? You only have so many times students can talk. If you're in a classroom setting, you know, you have a bunch of lessons to teach, right? And so you have to be very strategic about when are my kids going to talk and what are they going to talk about? Or if you're doing online, there's only so many times they're going to want to talk, right? Because they're frustrated just like we are with virtual. And so you really need to pick your moments, and you need to ensure when they're saying stuff, that they're saying stuff that's about what I want them to learn very specifically, okay? It should include critical vocabulary from the lesson, right? You want them to talk about, like we saw earlier, weight and buoyancy and magnetism and length, right? You want them to talk about physical properties if that's the lesson objective. And lastly, sometimes we write a STEM, right? And we just write it, and then we don't really think about, does it actually have them produce the language I want? Now, I get it. Some kids are going to be off topic and talk about whatever they want, regardless of the STEM you give them, right? But for those that are going to comply and follow the procedures, right? And sometimes with gentle prodding, just ask yourself, okay, is this actually going to allow them to talk about what I want them to talk about? Will it result, if they follow the procedure, in them using critical language that I want? Okay, so what we're going to do, excuse me, I'm going to drop these oral sentence stems into the chat for you, and you're going to use these stems in your breakout rooms, okay? And you can choose one of them. I can use sentence stems to promote oral English fluency in this particular upcoming lesson. Now, I realize that some of you are not planning lessons because you are looking at the big picture, right? You're coaching teachers or whatever it might be. But as you think about what are some upcoming lessons, or what are some things that you know kids struggle with in terms of benchmarks, things like that, okay? So choose a particular lesson area if you don't have a particular TEK in mind, okay? Or if you want to go back to the science TEK in measuring physical properties, you can use that one as well, all right? So the other STEM you can use is, the lesson objective is blank. The lesson objective is physical properties of objects. Therefore, a sentence STEM I might use would be, okay? So I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms. I'm going to give you 4 minutes, and let's have two people respond to one STEM, 2 people respond to the other, something like that. Does that work? All right. If this ever, there we go. I'm going to stop my share so I can drop that in there for you. Okay, don't forget to grab these with copy and paste because they will be gone. All right. So you have 2 stems. I only need each person to respond to 1, and I am going to come narc on you in your breakout rooms. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right. So you got 4 minutes. That gives each person 1 minute. All right. Rooms are open. Once you are gone, I will start the timer.
Okay, so I'll stop bouncing since you are recording now. Actually, I'm gonna stop.
You can bounce.
No, I'll give someone a seizure. I'll give someone.
No, I think it's only strobing light effects that give people seizures. I
Okay.
think bouncing is okay.
I'll give him a headache.
All right. If I'm oh, that's not good. everything is, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is like half frozen and weird.
Like your Zoom picture is frozen, but you're in looking at your screen. I can see you.
Okay. Well, I apologize. My Zoom is frozen, so I can't really do anything. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I see a square within a square. So I see
Yeah.
one version of you that's frozen, and then there's another version of you behind my screen.
All right. Well, when you're frozen, I think you're supposed to sing "Let It Go," but I don't think anybody wants to hear me sing. Okay. Well. Now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I apologize. I don't know what happened. I had to close Zoom and reopen it. Okay. So let's move on with our lives. Just minimize that. Okay, so sentence stems lead us naturally into planned interactions, right? If you're going to have students intentionally utilize sentence stems, they have to use them interacting with us, okay? I am reading a really interesting book, and it talks about the dialogical nature of identity, right? And so your students are going to engage in dialogical construction of their own language ability. And they do that through planned interaction. Okay. So obviously we all know about turn and talk. Okay. But what I want you to look at is what structures or routines and procedures is the teacher putting in place to ensure that the turn and talk is successful. Okay. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm aware that you know this, right? But the reality is it is a best practice for a reason, because it works.
Turn and talk is an oral language strategy that students can use to express themselves. In pre-K, what we try to do with turn and talk is to really get them to think and to be able to learn to speak to a partner. They sit knee to knee, so that allows them to really look and see eye to eye when they're speaking and really helps them learn to focus. Él va a hablar primero y después yo voy a estar escuchando. Cuando termine de hablar Bene, vamos a tomar un turno. Yo voy a hablar, siéntese bien Josiah, y después Bene va a estar escuchando. I love using this strategy because it also lets me go around and see what they're saying and if they're talking, because sometimes they feel more comfortable speaking to their friend than they do to me. And sometimes when I just ask a question one-on-one, they don't respond to me. But when I hear them talking to their partner, then I know they've understood the concept. They know what I'm talking about. They're getting what we're reading and they're understanding that. It helps them internalize the procedure, but it also helps things run smoother because it gives us more time to focus on the lesson and less time on teaching them that strategy every so often. Using a strategy on a constant basis and setting those expectations of what's expected is really essential to helping the kids be able to master it.
Okay, let me just, there we go. Okay, so what best practices, what procedures, what did you notice that the teacher did in order to make the planned interaction of turn and talk with our little pre-K babies successful? And you can chat it up or you can unmute, however you prefer. Adrian says, moved around to the groups to listen to conversations, modeled the activity. Now, what we call this, what you mentioned here in terms of the monitoring, we actually call that aggressive monitoring, right? It's not enough to just kind of set them off and hope for the best, right? You need to move around, let them know that you are listening, right? And then what I really like is when we come back is to choose one or two kiddos. Now you can do a debrief, right? But for example, I could say when I was going to the breakout, or when I went to the breakout rooms, I really liked how Ashley talked about Pete the cat and took the very simple setting of that story, but created a really high leverage sentence stem, which was the setting of Pete the cat was blank. I know this because blank. So it wasn't enough for the students to simply provide the setting. They were also required to provide text evidence, whether that be from the written text or from picture clues, right? So what I did is I praised the behavior that I wanted, and you get more of what you praise, right? And by the way, Ashley, in case you thought I wasn't paying attention, I was. So if you could text my wife and let her know that I do in fact listen, that would be great.
Will do.
Okay, so Ashley said pre-planned opportunities to stop. And I'm also sure she established some way to determine who speaks first. Yes, and we'll talk about that. All right. They were facing each other and not just near each other. It takes away their ability to avoid talking and hiding from participating. That is absolutely key. Thank you, Nathan. I love that. Okay, so we looked at turn and talk, right? And we tend to think of that in terms of our little people, right? But it's still just as good for our older kids. But let's take a look at something that does work a little easier. No, I don't. There we go. And again, you probably have heard or seen inside outside circle. This is a kind of a neat variation on it. And I think that it could translate to a virtual environment relatively well also.
Inside outside circle is something that I use to get the students talking again. Since I'm a French teacher, they have to talk a lot. So the way it works is that I give them a questionnaire. So this is a variation of inside outside circle. I have them turn the desk to face each other, and they have to just move from one desk to the other. And it's kind of like speed dating, where they're asking each other questions and they have to take notes of what the other student said. And then after they've gone through the 4, 5, or 6 questions that I have, they just stand up and switch desks so that they have someone else in front of them for the next round. I like inside outside circle because they can repeat the same thing 4 or 5 times, but because they are with different students each time, it's not as boring. And so it's something that I usually do maybe a few days after I introduce the vocabulary, so that it's not too fresh yet, because otherwise it wouldn't work as well.
All right. So if we think about, for example, Nathan and his group was mentioning a sentence stem dealing with finding the variable of an equation, right, Nathan? Yeah. Okay. Right. So you could even do a variation where maybe not, they don't respond to 4 or 5 people, right? But okay, you're going to talk and you're going to say, on problem 1, I found the variable in this way. And then the other person is going to say, I agree or disagree. Then we're going to move. Now, the person who agreed and disagreed is going to say how they found the variable for number 2, right? And then the person who shared the first time is going to agree or disagree. And so you could structure it that way, where they have 2 or 3 or 4 interactions, and they can make it through that way. Okay. So here we go. I'm not going to have you go back to breakout rooms for the sake of time, okay? But just some things to keep in mind. During a planned interaction, you need to assign partners and organize the interaction, right? Students need to know who they're going to talk to, for how long, right? And we're going to talk about some of those details. You need to have a specified talk order, as Ashley mentioned, right? You need to know who's, if it's just partners, who's partner A, who's partner B. Who's using what stems, right? If it's a small group, if they're doing a project, you might think about, okay, this is your assigned role in that group, and here's what you're responsible for saying, and here's what you're responsible for listening for, okay? I always put a timer, and then I don't know if you noticed, you may find it annoying when I'm like, okay, you have 30 seconds left. I'm not doing that to be annoying. I'm doing that to create urgency, right? It makes you think, oh, I haven't said anything, or oh, I'm almost done. I need to get going, right? So it keeps, hopefully, participants and students on track. And it also allows them to see, like, so if I say, okay, you have 10 minutes, right? You're not going to talk for 10 minutes, but all right, you're going to use 2 minutes to plan. You're going to use 2 minutes to talk, right? I need to intentionally break up those chunks so that people are on time and on track. Okay. Again, you need a talking stem, and then you need some kind of signal to return, right? In Zoom, that's pretty easy, right? You have 60 seconds and it kicks you out, right? But with littles, right? I'll always like 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And they respond 1, 2, eyes on you, right? So you have some kind of signal for them to come back, okay? All right, this is the last thing. So what happens when you have kiddos, right, that don't want to talk, that don't want to share, either because they're unwilling or because they're unable or because they're embarrassed, right? Or what do you do with, you're trying to get some kind of comprehensible oral output. What do you do with the kid that's like, right? And they just don't want to, right? You can't force them, right? So for that, I would use the teach back, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, complete sentences, right, when speaking, are children's friend. And we know that even at the secondary level, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like a lot of 11th and 12th graders are just giving us these scintillating oral responses, right? A lot of times we get truncated sentence fragments at best. Am I right? I'm going to take it by your silence. Okay. Exactly.
I was just waiting for it to come on. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Truncated sentence fragment, right? So then how do we fix that? All right. So take a look at this teacher. They have rolled up a whole bunch of modalities all into one. Okay. And what you notice is because she's getting filmed, she calls on the kid who can clearly do it. Right. But we're going to talk about how do you help the kid that can't or is unwilling.
This book, I use these sentence starters to help me think of a connection in my mind. The part when Alexander goes to the dentist and has a cavity reminds me of the time when I went to the dentist and I had a cavity. I felt so worried and scared. This helps me understand the story better because now I know that Alexander must be just as worried and scared as I was. Can any of you think of a connection that you made from the book that I just read to you?
The part when Alexander tripped on his skateboard reminds me of when I fell down the stairs. I felt really hurt. This helps me understand the story there because I think Alexander feels hurt.
Okay. So, right, if you were getting filmed, you would have called on a nom too. Right? Because clearly she's very bright. She can express herself well, right? She doesn't need a lot of prompting, okay? But the question is, what do you do when a student can't or won't, okay? So the teach back is actually based on the work of Darren DeWalt, who is a medical doctor. He's not even a teacher, right? And I only know about it because of my wife, who is a critical care nurse. So you're going to discharge a patient, right? And they have to care for their own wounds. They have to take their own medicine. They have to do whatever regimen they need to do to get back to full health. But you don't want to discharge them without at least having some assurance that they know how to do that. So first, you tell them what they need to do. Don't forget, you need to take your medicine at 8 p.m. orally with a glass of water, and then again at 8 a.m. So you take it twice a day with water, with food, whatever, right? You then ask them to repeat it. So can you tell me when you need to take your medication? You listen to see if they understood. If they understood, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Best of luck with your recovery. You send them on their way. If they don't, then you come back, you tell them the part that is missing, you ask them to repeat it, you listen again, and you verify understanding, okay? Now, again, I wouldn't do this more than 2 or 3 times with any individual, right? Because then it's just frustrating. But this is a really good way for us to address misunderstandings. Okay, so we're going to do two different examples. Let me escape real quick. When you full screen a video, I forget that you have to go escape fully and then go back to present. Okay, so I need somebody, because we're going to do two different examples here. Okay, I need somebody to be the unwilling student. Like you're the one, like, I don't care, I'm not going to answer your question. And then I need somebody to be my high flyer. So who wants to be my delinquent? Okay, so Tamara, you're going to be my delinquent, okay? And don't call children delinquents. That's not nice. Don't do that, okay? I'm just kidding. And who wants to be my high flyer? Come on, don't be shy. I'll volunteer you if I have to. Tamara, you can't do both. That's not possible. All right. Ashley, I'm going to volunteer you because in your group, you were authoritative and you were together. Are you with me? Okay. Sure. So Tamara, remember, your job is to, you can be like, I don't know, or like however you want to play it. Okay. So Tamara, can you remind me about the life cycle of the butterfly? And can you tell me in a complete sentence, what are each of those 4 stages of the life cycle of the butterfly?
I don't remember.
You don't know? Oh, you don't remember? Okay, that's not a problem at all. You know what? Let's phone a friend. Let's get you some help. Ashley, can you help Tamara? Can you go ahead and tell me what are those 4 stages of the life cycle of the butterfly in a complete sentence, please?
The life cycle of a butterfly is the egg, the larva or the caterpillar.
Yes, perfect. You're doing great. Keep going.
The pupa, chrysalis, and then it becomes the adult butterfly, right?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Snaps for Ashley. Thank you, everybody. All right, Tamara, I bet you that you remembered a lot more than you thought. So having heard Ashley's, can you tell me in your own words, what are the 4 stages of the butterfly life cycle?
No.
Well, she said it started with the egg, right? So where does it start?
I guess the egg.
Yep, it starts with the egg. Perfect. And then remember, she said this was a pupa, but what's the less complicated name? Remember the hungry little?
Oh, caterpillar.
Perfect. So what's the second stage?
Caterpillar.
Yep, the second stage is a caterpillar. Let's try the third stage in a complete sentence. You remember?
I don't know that one.
Okay, well, this one is a chrysalis. So can you say that in a complete sentence? The third stage is what?
Okay, the third stage is the chrysalis.
The chrysalis. That was great. See, thank you so much. And then when it comes out as an adult, what is it?
That's a butterfly. I know
Perfect.
that.
Yes, you do. See, you did great. Well done. Snaps for Tamara, everybody. Well done, Tamara. No, Tamara, don't snap for yourself. That's conceited. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Don't say that to children. Don't say that to children either, please. I'm just trying to entertain you. Don't call children conceited, okay? All right. So, you know what? I won't belabor the point here, but the bottom line is, you see how I did that, right? I did accept some partial answers, but I did my best to get her to use the lesson vocabulary and to use it in a complete sentence, right? And when worst comes to worst, when like someone's like, I don't know, well, call, you know, that kid that always raises their hand, right? And they're constantly jumping in their seat, right? And they're unaware of, especially in like, even in secondary, there's some of those kids that they haven't apparently been made fun of enough by everybody else. So they still want to demonstrate how they're smarter than everyone, right? So go ahead and call on that kid. And then the first child, right? If you're like, okay, well, they said it, so now you say it. Chances are, because of peer pressure, they're not going to want to look like a dummy that doesn't know anything, right? Now, sometimes they're still going to play it cool and be like, I'm not going to answer you anyway, right? But you can use positive peer pressure in that case, okay? So when in doubt and children are unwilling or unable to answer, help them with the teach back. Okay, so let's go back to our earlier content objective, and this is our last activity before the break, okay? So think about, you can do one of two things. You can use the science objective and I'll redrop it in the chat because you'd have to scroll quite a bit. You can use that science objective about measuring physical properties of objects, or if like Nathan already had a lesson for this week, right? Ashley already had a lesson. If you want to use one of their objectives, that's fine, okay? What I want you to do is select a speaking ELPS or a strategy, right? Sentence stems or plan interaction, you can use one of those to pair with it. And I want you to write a content objective and a language objective for whatever it is that you would teach. So what are you teaching and how are you going to have students speak about it? Okay. All right. And again, you can use sentence stems or you can use a planned interaction. Okay. So you choose an objective or use the science objective from earlier. I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat for you. And then I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And then, like I said, the good news is we're taking a break after that. Okay. So remember, just like we did with listening. All right, there's the content objective for third grade science. You can use that or one of your choice. Pair the content objective with one speaking ELPS or one specific strategy that we've talked about, and go ahead and be prepared to drop it in the chat when we come back. Okay, I have now opened up all of the rooms. All right, for those of you that are back, welcome back. We have just a few seconds and everyone will be rejoining us. All righty. Everyone is back now. Welcome back. So if your group recorder will be kind enough to drop your objective, including your content and your speaking ELP or strategy, I would be most appreciative. Okay, so Adrian's group said the students will watch a video of the teacher conducting a lab. Okay, then they will use sentence frames to create questions over temperature, mass, and magnetism to ask their partner, who will respond to their question using a provided sentence stem. I love it. I love the fact that they are not only speaking, but they are generating questions to have other students respond to as well. Fantastic. All right. All right. And then I should know because there's only two groups. Adrian, what number are you guys? 1 or 2? 1. Okay. Group number 2. By the way, group number 1, you guys remember you guys were struggling a little bit last time, right? You totally redeemed yourselves. See? You have arisen like the phoenix. All right, so I won't belabor it. We'll assume that group number 2 is working on it. So here's what we'll do. Morgan Freeman says it's time for your break. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Obviously, I'm going to pause the recording first, and then I'll put the timer on, so you'll actually get a little bit of extra time. So it is 10:27. So plan on joining me back at 10:42 or 3. Okay. So 15 minutes, group number 2, if you'd be kind enough to post that, you can do it when you come back. It's fine. Okay. All right, so like I said, hopefully you had a wonderful break. I know a few of our friends are still making their way back, and that is totally okay. And group number 2, thank you for posting your response. And theirs was this, after a direct teach and group discussion, the students will identify ways that cultural ideas change over time. The students will respond to the following sentence stem. One way that cultural ideas change over time is blank. The evidence that supports this is blank. And this is related to a 10 through 12th grade Mexican American ethnic studies course. So thank you very much. All right, so we are halfway there. All right, so we looked at listening, we looked at speaking, and now let's move on to the third modality, which is reading. Okay, I am going to drop the descriptors for K1 reading and for 2 through 12 reading. I realize 2 through 12 is a really long span, as most second graders are still largely emerging readers, right? They're reading to learn, but they're still learning how to read. It's kind of, they exist in both worlds. So give me one moment. We'll drop those in there for you. There we go. Okay, so these are the reading proficiency descriptors for K1 emerging readers. We'll also give you the one for 2 through 12 readers. Okay. We are not going to camp out here. Again, you are all clearly literate and very educated, so you can read those whenever you have the opportunity. Okay. What I do want to just take note of is well, I can't take note of anything until my screen actually shares. Okay. So for our emerging readers in kindergarten through first grade, it's looking at the ability to derive meaning from text read aloud, right? And a quick word about read alouds. We know that we do those very often in the primary grades, and we tend to stray away from it in upper grades for a variety of reasons. Some people feel like it's not appropriate. Some people don't have the time, right? Because if you have a 45-minute class, there's only so much you can do. But what I will say is that research demonstrates that students can understand text read aloud that is several grades above where they are in terms of their own academic ability. Obviously, that is with structured supports, right? With the teacher pre-teaching vocabulary, using a lot of the strategies that we are going to look at during this portion. So you may not have time for read alouds all the time if you're at the secondary level, but you can have really meaningful discussions, really rich academic discourse with text that you read aloud and walk students through. Okay, so and the other major point in the K1 rubric, right, is for children to recognize environmental print all the way up to common sight words. And then lastly, from beginner to advanced high, we see the varying ability to decode text. Okay. For 2 through 12, it looks at the depth and complexity of what students can read, right? Their reading speed, prosody, accuracy, all of that good stuff, right? Their ability to engage with grade appropriate text. And lastly, their ability to apply comprehension skills, okay? And again, same thing. Students can still wrestle with complex text much more easily if it's done orally or aurally. I have a really hard time saying that's AU because I'm from New Jersey. My wife likes to make fun of me because I can't say lawyer. It's not lawyer, it's lawyer. I can't say. Okay. So again, for the LIAG, we are looking at pages 8 through 11. So I do want you to take the 3 minutes and go ahead and look at, now again, there's 4 pages, right? Because there's all of the information for K1 and there's all of the information for 2 through 12. You may think, well, I do pretty much secondary, so I don't need to know the K1 stuff. The only thing I would say is if you get newcomers, right? If you get refugees, asylees, immigrant students, some of those best practices and teacher behaviors for younger students are still going to be very applicable. So if you have time, you might want to take a look at that. Okay. So 3 minutes for pages 8 through 11. On your marks, get set, maybe go. It probably isn't. Hey, it worked the first time. Just about 1 minute remaining. 1 minute remaining. All right. Nope, that wasn't the one. Sorry about that. My screen got frozen for a moment. Okay, so now that you've had a chance to look over the best practices and suggested teacher behaviors for each proficiency level, let's talk about one 4-part strategy that incorporates a variety of modalities, okay? There we go. And that strategy is talk, read, talk, write, okay? So you start off by talking about an open-ended essential question that is going to set the context of the lesson, okay? And then what you do is you read a text that addresses that essential question or lesson objective, right? And then you revisit that question after having read, and then you talk about it, all right? So the question is, what might the talk, read, talk, write strategy involve? How do you think this strategy might help English learners understand increasingly complex text and develop greater academic vocabulary? All right, so I'm going to send you to your breakout rooms. I'm going to give you about, say, 3.5 minutes. So you're going to say, I think the talk, read, talk, write strategy involves, and then I think this strategy will help English learners understand increasingly complex text and develop academic vocabulary because. So there are 4 of you in each group, although we may have lost 1 participant, I'm not sure. And so there's 7. So one group will have 3. So what I would say is one person can respond. The second person can respond to that response with one of the stems. I agree because, I disagree because, I partially agree because, okay? And then the third person responds to the stem as well, and the fourth person responds to their response. In a group of 3, right, you're gonna have one person share, one person will use the response stems, the third person will share, and if you want to agree or disagree, you can, or you don't have to. Okay, so I'm gonna drop those in the chat for you so you know exactly what you need to say. Don't forget to copy and paste those. Sorry, my computer is being really slow. All right, here we go. They are in the chat for you to grab. All right, so remember, you're going to talk in turns. I'll let you choose who goes first and who responds. I'll give you 3.5 minutes. Rooms are open. Go. All right, welcome back, everybody. So in the chat, you are going to see the link for this article, Talk, Read, Talk, Write for ELs. Okay, it's going to have this very handy dandy graphic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a whopping 5 minutes to read the article. Okay? As you read, remember, right? We want to know what the strategy is. I outlined it very briefly. You talked about what you thought it entailed based on that and based on any prior knowledge you may have possessed. And then you talked about how is it going to intentionally help English learners read increasingly complex texts and develop academic vocabulary. So be looking for both of those things as you read. Okay? So open up the article. You have 5 minutes. It probably would have helped if I had put a timer on this screen. I feel like there was one once upon a time, but clearly that's not the case. So I'll set it on my phone and I'll give you, there's 3 minutes, 1 minute, and so on. All right. So go ahead, open the article, read, and be looking for what is the strategy? How does it help English learners with complex text and academic vocabulary? Go. Just under 3 minutes remaining. Just under 3 minutes. One minute remaining. 1 minute. All right. That is time. If you did not complete the article, that is okay. You should still be able to participate in the remainder of the activity, and you can go back and finish it at your leisure. So, obviously, now the reason I have talk 3 is because in the original, I did a separate presentation on this and I had an intermediate talk, but for sake of time, I cut that out. So you're going to respond to this stem. I now know that the talk, read, talk, write strategy involves blank, right? You're going to update your knowledge based on what you just read. And you're going to respond to the same stem, excuse me. I think this strategy will help English learners understand increasingly complex text and develop academic vocabulary because, all right? There is less people, so I'm not going to give you 5. I'm going to give you 3. Just like before, I'm going to drop these in the chat for you. I'll send you to your breakout rooms, and this time I will join you so I can benefit from hearing your excellent conversation. Okay. It is in the chat. Go ahead and grab it. And there will be only 3 of you because 2 of our participants did need to leave. So just go ahead and chat amongst yourselves, those of you that remain. All right. It looks like everyone's back. Sorry, my Zoom kicked me out of my own meeting again. Okay, so first of all, allow me to apologize. Apparently, I don't know how to tell time because I have grossly mismanaged this, and I realize we have 20 minutes left. So we are going to have to zoom through the ending, and I apologize. That is 100% on me. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought we were doing great and we were moving nicely, but apparently I don't know how to tell time. So lastly, you want students to write, okay? Now you have a couple of options. If your students are beginning or intermediate, or if you don't have a lot of time, they can literally, whatever they talked about, they can just respond in writing. And therefore the talk was oral rehearsal for what they put on paper, right? Or you can ask some extension questions. And again, a lot of that is based on what did you observe as children were sharing, okay? And Maria, I will give you access to the presentation tomorrow. I will send a PDF version. So you will have the presentation in its entirety with all of the links and with everything, okay? So let not your heart be troubled. I got you. All right. Okay. So we're not going to write right now, but this is going to be our segue to the writing portion. Okay. So, and the pen is indeed mightier than the sword. All right. So I'm going to drop real quick. Actually, you know what? Because we're not going to really have time to go through it, so I'm not going to drop it. You will have access to the PLDs through the presentation tomorrow, and so you can look at those more in depth. But what I want you to know is they talk about the ability for K1 for children to explain themselves in self-generated writing, their ability to participate in grade appropriate shared writing, shared being the operative term there, right? Because they are emerging writers. Then their ability to express themselves in self-generated and hopefully increasingly connected writing. And it talks about the continuum of exhibition of second language acquisition errors, okay? For the 2 through 12 rubric, we're looking at their ability to use English to express themselves, to develop and demonstrate grade appropriate writing. And then it talks about what the typical features are by proficiency in terms of length of what they can write, vocabulary choice, syntax, and things like that. Okay. Now for the LIAG, this is pages 12 through 15. And unfortunately, we're not going to take the 3 minutes, but I would highly recommend that you look at those. And what you're going to see is the activities fall within the scope of the writing process. Okay. And so what we're going to look at here is, all right, we're going to look at what are the scaffolded supports for beginning writing, okay, developing writing, right, expressing themselves in more complete pieces, and then editing and revising their writing. So we're going to look at graphic organizers to help students formulate their thinking, word walls and word banks to help them with academic vocabulary and knowing what vocabulary to use, right? How we can use sentence stems, right? Not just orally, but to have students develop more thoughtful academic writing. And then lastly, the process of finalizing that writing through editing and revising, okay? Okay, now you may already be aware of this, but Google has already created a bunch of editable graphic organizers, which you can have students use in class or online. And once you make your own copy of those, and I'm dropping them in the chat right now. Once you make your own copy of those, they are completely editable. Not only can you fill in the bubbles or the boxes or blanks, but you can rename those boxes or blanks to whatever kind of categories you want. Okay, so if you have never had access to those, it is a really great way for students to, and again, if you drop it into Google Drive, right, you can create a Google slide presentation, or you can have them make their own copies, and students can work on those collaboratively, okay? So for purposes of today, I was gonna have you guys work on this bubble map, but again, because I don't know how to tell time, we're not gonna do that, but we will engage in one collaborative activity in this section, okay? All right, it is not your turn. That is a lie. So let's talk about word walls and word banks, okay? We're just gonna watch about a minute of this, and what I want you to think about is many of you have seen and probably even used word walls, but what is the difference between a traditional word wall and a genuinely interactive word wall that is student created and that allows for student interaction, okay? All right, so I think you get the point there. Basically, in a traditional word wall, we have an alphabetic list of words, right? The teacher creates it, it's up all year, you add some words here and there, but the words are largely added randomly, sporadically, and are only referred to intermittently at best, right? But with an interactive one, it is based on a theme, a unit, or a teak, okay? And it's basically a graphic organizer, which if you notice, right, I talked about graphic organizers as a fundamental aspect of planning writing, right? And so if you think about using a graphic organizer to organize student writing, it's also a way to organize concepts so that students can write about them in meaningful ways, right? And again, if you notice there, the students were bit by bit creating right? They don't just do that all in one shot, because it is based on a unit or a collection of specific TEKs that go together. You create it over time, over a series of days, right? That word wall changes with each unit, right? It can have words, pictures, and even real objects, especially if you're doing science, okay? And the words are all related to specific TEKs, okay? So you're gonna have that video in its entirety once you get the presentation. It's really well worth the time, and I highly recommend you take a look at it. And I'll actually be doing a session on interactive word walls, which I'll talk about later. Okay, now this is what I really want to jump on real quick. In terms of thinking about giving students a word bank, this is from John Seidlitz's book, Great Academic Language Builders, and it's called Building Block Cards. And basically what you do is you take a concept. So earlier we did the life cycle of a butterfly, so we're going to revisit that, right? Then you give students the big picture words that are necessary for them to understand that content. In this case, it's metamorphosis, pupa, caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly. Then you give them, so these are the bricks. These words are the mortar which hold the bricks together, right? This is not necessarily an exhaustive or exclusive list, but it's words that they would need in order to write about the brick words meaningfully, okay? And so some possible student responses using these 5 words and then some of the non-content specific words. A butterfly begins as a caterpillar and then a chrysalis forms. It is now called a pupa, and then it breaks out as a butterfly. This process is called metamorphosis. And so you see that by providing a word bank and providing interconnected words, students are able to write a summary of comprehensible content, right, in a way that is all academic language, okay? So we are going to practice that right now. I'm going to drop this into the chat for you. And this should ask you to make a copy. So go ahead and click on it. And what'll happen is once you drop that into your browser, you should get a screen that looks like this. If it doesn't work or doesn't allow you access, please tell me. It should. It looks like everyone's good. Yes? No, it won't let you in? Is it not letting anybody in? Really? Oh, man. Okay, well, I apologize. I promise I checked all the sharing permissions on all the shareable stuff. Sometimes Google does that. Okay, well, that's my bad. So then, you know what? Let's work through this together, okay? Let's just work through it together. Let me see. I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. Maybe, if it lets me. No, I'm making it small. Oh, okay. That's not what you want to do, apparently. Okay. Can everyone see that pretty well? Y'all can read the text? Yes? Okay. So go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to work on this together. The words are scaffolded writing supports. That's our general topic. We're talking about graphic organizers, word walls and word banks, sentence stems, editing and revising. Okay. And then I've created some non-content specific words and phrases. Differentiate, strategy, language development, language acquisition, organize, assist, academic discourse, foundation, extend, improve, correct, mistakes, leverage, yada, yada, yada. Now, you don't have to use you don't have to use all or any of these, but you do have to use all 5. So help me construct a couple of sentences that explain. So let's start like this. Scaffolded writing supports such as, all right, scaffolded writing supports such as graphic organizers do what? What are they? What do they do? How do they help English learners? Somebody unmute and jump on it or chat it up.
I think first is you need to organize. You have to organize
organizer is an organizer.
Okay, so graphic organizer.
Strategy to organize.
Ah,
This is
okay.
strategy.
Are strategies to organize. Okay, that doesn't work. Organize what? What dimension? What modality? Which language modality are we talking about, y'all?
Writing.
Okay. Will that work? Scaffolded writing support, such as graphic organizers, are strategies to organize writing so that students can do what?
Understand.
Okay.
To
Extend.
Mm-hmm.
Extend their learning.
Okay, so how about understand content and extend their learning?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Not their earning.
Not their earning.
Although if they can't write, their earning potential is seriously impacted. Let's just be honest. Okay, but you get the point, right? Now, this isn't really fair because we haven't done a really in-depth coverage of this, but you see how maybe after you complete a unit and you've made that word wall or you've discussed those concepts, maybe you've done talk, read, talk, write, you've done some sentence stems and organized planned interactions. You can then gauge what students know by allowing them to summarize their learning in writing, right? And again, if you're like, some of my students are really, they're still very much beginners or intermediate, how could I help them? Well, you could take some of this information and put it into sentence stems for them with some blanks, right? So it scaffolds very easily. Okay. All right. We only have a few minutes, so we are gonna have to zoom. And again, I don't want to full screen that. Sorry about that. So we looked at graphic organizers, we looked at word banks and word walls. If this ever shares, I will finish us up. Okay. So again, I'm going to provide you, we've already talked about sentence stems. I'm not going to do that to death, but I'm going to provide you with some question stems that are specifically related to depth of knowledge. So you can look at the verbs in your TEK and determine which kind of questions are appropriate, right? And again, the nice thing about a question stem, right? If I ask a student, can you recall blank? I can have them respond with, I recall blank. And I can help them if they require assistance to turn that question into a comprehensible sentence stem for their response, right? Sorry. I'm also going to give you generic sentence stems that go with specific cognitive tasks. So if I want students to access prior knowledge, if I want them to share their opinion and feelings, I want elaboration, justification, summarizing. And then if you know any bilingual teachers, I have these in Spanish as well, okay? So I'm gonna share that with you. So then you don't have to constantly generate these. You already have some ready-made ones available to you. Lastly, when we think about editing and revision, I would recommend, this is a race rubric, okay? And it allows students to specifically critique their own or each other's written response to a nonfiction prompt, okay? Excuse me. I use this most frequently with science and social studies, or if I had students, you know, talking about something in reading that was nonfiction. There's obviously, now look, you can find gazillions of rubrics. You just type in second grade rubric for nonfiction, it'll come up with a whole bunch, okay? So I'm not trying to give you an exhaustive list. I'm just trying to give you some context. If you want students writing to improve, give them expectations and give them specific dimensions to look for, okay? Lastly, remember, I know I keep putting edit and revise and then, but the reason I did that is because we tend to do that. It's really easy to look for capitalization and punctuation and spelling, right? Well, just go look on the word wall, right? But really, this should be the icing on the cake. We really want students first to do the revisions where, okay, what additional sensory details can you add? What sentences do you have that are clearly not related to the topic? You know, especially in elementary, that is a big mistake they make. They're like, well, I woke up and I brushed my teeth and I ate one piece of toast and then I fought with my sister. And then they've used all their lines right on their fourth grade writing, and then they haven't talked about the topic at all. So maybe take out the entire litany of how many strokes you brushed your teeth with and get to the point, right? Okay. So we want them first to work on organization and general way they're communicating before they get into the fine detail of capitalization and punctuation and usage. All right. And again, I have given you some editing checklists. Again, these are by no means exclusive, right? And if children are old enough, if they can engage in academic discourse, right, with support, they can also peer edit with support. Okay, so I've provided those resources for you. So you have stuff for planning, you have stuff for vocabulary usage and word choice, you have different stems to generate thoughts and ideas, and then you have some checklists and rubrics so students can gauge the quality of their own writing. All right, so the last thing, if you'd be so kind, I just have a 3-question Google form that is a review of this, so I know how much you learned and what I can do to make the session better. Okay, it's I'm going to put the Google form in the chat, but you will need to enter the date, the session number, and the title, and I'll put those in the chat as well. All right, this will be our final activity, and then just a very, very quick word, and I will let you go. And I apologize, we will be a few minutes late. That is on me. Thank you for sticking with me. All right, I have put the Google form in the chat. And now I'm also going to give you the date, the number of the session, and the title. So most folks usually finish that in about 3 minutes. There's not a rush, but I don't want to take too much of your time, okay? Once you are done, go ahead and put in the chat done so that I know we can move on. All right, thank you to 2 of you that are done. Just waiting on a couple more. Nathan, I'm very glad that you were here because usually it's just me and a bunch of ladies, which is cool. No problem with that, but it's always nice to have another dude.
It's part of the job, right? Teaching.
That is part of the job, yes. All right. Thank you so much. If you're still finishing up, no problem at all. Thank you for taking the time to provide me with that information. So the last things I have for you, and you will receive all of this tomorrow. I just want to make a quick note of it, and I will let you go, and you will only be 2 minutes over time. All right, maybe. Come on, help me. There we go. I do have a monthly bilingual professional learning s'more, and you may be thinking, I'm not a bilingual teacher, dummy. I know that, but these strategies are good for all kiddos and for all English learners. It is through the lens of bilingualism, but I think you will still find it useful. But my colleague on the English learner team, Melanie Yoakum, has her English learner professional learning s'more, and you can sign up for that one. We also have the English Learner Parent Support Newsletter. This can go directly to parents. So there's the online version, and then we send out a PDF printable version so you can make a front and back copy and send it home with any kiddos that actually come in person if their parents don't have technology or aren't that savvy. All right, I will also send you my upcoming sessions, and then all of our contact information will be linked on this page in the PDF. So our Twitter, our Facebook, our YouTube channel, all of that will be directly accessible here. So that concludes today. Thank you so